Welcome to the XYZ Experiment podcast. It's Fiona here, your Gen X, and I'm joined by Darsh, my Gen Y, and Luke, my Gen Z. Hi guys, how are you going today?
Hello.
So I want to know, how do you know when you're doing life right? So is it stability? Is it peace? Is it visibility? Is it happiness? Is it momentum? Because I had an experience recently, only this week, where I met a friend, a colleague in the street after I'd been to a lecture and asked him, how's life going? How are you going? And life wasn't going so great for him. And we were having a really long conversation about why life wasn't going great. And he told me that at the time he's not working at the moment because that's his way of coping. And so he said, I'm not working at the moment. And he goes, I'm now starting to think maybe I've got too much spare time to think about woe is me. Should I go back to work and take my mind off it? And it was in that moment when I was talking to him that I realized that at the moment I'm in a really good phase of my life, really good life stability, really good happiness, really good balance would be the way that I'd put it, because I have gone back to work pretty much full time. Plus, I've taken on a whole lot of other projects as well. And so I'm busier than ever. But it was only in that moment that I understood that my mental health and my overall health really benefits from actually being busy, not having too much spare time on my hands. Or it's not having too much spare time. It's about having a really good balance. And I realize that I have a very good balance at the moment. And also, the other thing too is that I'm waking up at the same time every day. I'm going to
Mhm.
bed at the same time every day. Let's put that down to routine. I've got a really good routine at the moment. And
Mm.
so that's how I know I'm doing life right at the moment. And I just wondered, how do you guys know that you're doing life right?
Well, I guess I often know when I'm doing life wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will then have moments of doing life right. And I'll tell you what my characteristics of those are. But I don't always feel I can sustain it, like to be doing life right or feeling like I'm in that right space for very long periods of time. So I think stability and routine are super important for me as well. And I like to know what's happening, being able to plan, being able to kind of do the things that I know keep myself well, can be really good. I think it's been interesting this year because I feel like I've kind of stepped out on my own a little bit more in work. I'm taking bigger risks. And I feel like that has made me feel like I'm doing life right because I'm not in that safe conservative space. I am taking risks. I mean, they're safe risks, to be honest, but still, like, I'm pushing myself. I'm learning new things. I'm feeling excited, and I feel like there's momentum. I think as soon as I feel like my life is like stuck or that I'm just doing the same thing and it's a drudgery, I don't feel like I'm doing life right. And so it does come back to me feeling like I'm moving forward. I've got momentum. I have that routine down. I'm doing the things that I love. Um, but I think the challenge with keeping that is that it means that I have to close the door on a lot of other things or say no
Mm.
to a lot of other things to make sure that those things then stay. And so that's not always feasible. And things then just creep in, and you're like, oh God, now I'm really tired because I've gone out too much, or I'm doing too much on the weekends, or, I have to do other things that aren't as fulfilling, which we have to do. But then I don't feel like I'm doing life right. But what about you, Luke?
Yeah, I think you touched on a good point there. What I've actually been reflecting on is I think it's a very my generation thing to do, to be really really reflecting on what makes the good life, what's important, how do you attain meaning and contentedness, and almost trying to like categorize it and like make this kind of shopping list of things that have to happen in order for you to feel like you're winning life. And what I've actually noticed over the last, I would say 3 or 4 months, is what's led to that feeling of contentedness for me is actually having a little bit of like psychological flexibility around what that even looks like. I remember writing down this list of like, okay, I need to have this really strict routine where sleep is really good, I'm eating well, I'm meditating, I'm reading, I'm walking, I'm socializing, and I guess those core elements of well-being that we often are like hammering on about, right? But I think it's really, really fair to also acknowledge that in many cases, that's not necessarily going to happen. You're not going to get this really beautiful
Mm,
balance of it all in like any given day or any given week. There are times where you're going to be pulled in one direction or the other. And that's totally okay. You might have a few non-negotiables and you'll feel good if you're able to kind of commit to those and irrespective of what's going on, like successfully live those values, whether like for me, the non-negotiable is obviously sleep. But I think having that flexibility of even Darsh and I were talking before the recording about like marking and how we've got a lot of marking. For me and like my marking career, it's really small pockets of time where I'll be marking. And that means that I can be busy and it might mean that I even have to like work on the weekend for like a couple weekends of the year. But that doesn't make me feel like I'm like not winning life or I'm not living the right life because the balance is a little bit out of whack for the next couple weeks because
mm,
ultimately it still feeds into this, value I have around accomplishment and contribution. And just as long as I feel as though what I'm doing is relatively aligning with my values, I think that's kind of more important. And not beating yourself up over this idea that like you're not sticking to a really categorical lifestyle.
Do you ever fantasize about there could be a better life? Like, do you ever fantasize like that? Like, you hear people often say, they give it all up. If I won lotto, I'd do this,
yeah.
I wouldn't work anymore, because often that's a joke my husband and I talk about if we won lotto and he goes, would you still work? And I go, yeah, I'd still work a little bit. Yeah. I might not work full time, but I would definitely still work because I need that for life to be happy. I need purpose. I need purpose.
Mm. I think the things that I sometimes fantasize about aren't necessarily not doing the things I'm currently doing, which I find fun, but maybe I often go, oh, it would be really amazing to have a PA or a home chef or someone to do like the grocery shopping or like all of those kind of things. Um, like definitely cooking, like as my diet has become more and more complicated, I'm often like, oh, that would be so amazing. But that doesn't make me feel like I'm not doing life well. I think it would just be a mental load bit that gets
Yeah.
taken off my plate.
Yeah.
Um, but I never fantasize about not working. Yeah, I'm like you. I'd find that really hard.
Yeah, I third that. I think not having there be like a financial element to the work that you're doing would be really, really nice. That'd just give you a little bit more space, or give me, I guess, a bit more space to think about how I'm working and the people I'm seeing, right? But if I won the lottery, it wouldn't make me want to stop working because part of, and I imagine it's for all of us, part of like winning life is, again, that sense of contributing to your community, achievement, producing things that are really valuable to the world. And so it makes sense that you'd want to keep doing that, even if you had the financial element like covered.
If you listen to a lot of like, or read, if you listen to a lot of podcasts or if you read a lot of self-help books and things like that, they talk so much about you've got work, you've got play, and then you've got spirituality. And I'm wondering if spirituality is important to your balance. And I'm not even necessarily talking about religion, but talking about the meditation or what do you see as that third element in your life?
I think, you could argue that this is maybe play as well, but I think that third element is definitely like connection. And
Mm.
that's like connection to yourself, which I think is, it actually has to become its own category, particularly now when there's a lot of disconnect from ourselves, whether it's through like distractions or even, I'm not saying that we're using business as a distraction, but if you're going to be spending a lot of time working and out of your body, it's important to be able to reconnect with it. but also connection with other people as well. I think like genuine human connection. We talk a lot about whether or not people, this idea of introverts and extroverts and people
Mm,
like not in like needing as much social connection or it being draining or anxiety inducing, but ultimately everyone needs a certain level of social connection in whatever way it's preferred to them in order for them to reach that like level of contentedness. So I think for me, really reflecting on not that it's the same spirituality, but I think that third section is definitely around connection.
and it's interesting you bring that up because a lot of the media and research has been talking about the loneliness epidemic and the impact that that's been having on people's well-being. And I did watch something on social media, and it was a woman in her 30s, or maybe she was even in her early 40s, and she's like, I have no friends. And I feel like
Mm.
I'm a failure at life because I have no friends. Like all of my connections, and I hear these stories of people going out and having dinners and having girl weekends and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm sitting here at home alone, not in that connection space. And so I do think you've touched on something really important there. And I do think people use that as a marker of success. Like, do I have that connection? Do I have friendships and relationships around me that are important?
It's almost that you can turn that word spirituality into community.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's almost like, because what is a church but a community? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's almost like you can turn it into that, that it's connection with others. And last night I went to a show which was at the Immigration Museum, and it was Vivaldi's Four Seasons and with a light show. And it was magnificent. Like, you laid back on these sort of beanbag type chairs and you just watch as the music, well, as the light show matches this incredible music piece. And to be honest, I just wanted to close my eyes to enjoy the music, but I couldn't because the display was so spectacular. But to me, that's almost community. Me and
Yeah.
100 people all lying on these beanbags, experiencing this incredible thing, listening, hearing, speak. I don't know. It was incredible, and that almost is part of my being really connected in my life, being well-rounded, doing that sort of thing. And it was a really cheap experience, which helped as well. It wasn't expensive, but yeah, that's almost like my church, if that makes sense. Like going to see things like that and sitting in an audience and listening to people doing things.
Do you know that's really interesting? Because as our listeners probably know, I haven't gone to church for a long time, having grown up going to church. But one thing I absolutely do to this day still miss about going to church and being in church services is corporate
Yeah,
singing, community singing,
yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
congregational singing.
yeah,
And it doesn't matter how you sound or whatever, but you're singing the same song together. And I think it's like this incredible moment of like bringing people together because they're
yeah.
singing. It's like why people sing the national anthem together at key events and
Mm.
all of those kind of things. And it was interesting because I did go to a concert. I don't go to concerts very often, but I do love Mumford and Sons, and they grew up in churches.
Mm.
And they, concerts, everyone like sings along, but they really incorporate this kind of congregational singing element into their concerts. And I was like, wow, I really do miss this.
Mm.
And it is a bit of that uplifting element, which I do think helps you feel connected to the people around you, even if they're absolute strangers. You're all singing the same thing. But it kind of is that bigger picture. So that spirituality thing, I do think comes from that. I mean, it's not, as you say, it might not be about do you believe in God or not, but it's like how do you come together in a bigger way?
When we go to midnight mass at Christmas time, we base our choice of mass on the singing. And I'm not
Mm.
kidding. I'm not kidding.
Like what
So
songs they're singing or whether
no,
they're
about
singing.
whether they have a really great group of singers there. So, for example, in Marrickville in Sydney, there is an incredible Catholic church there where they have a whole lot of Islander singers, a family,
Wow.
and the singing is unbelievable. It's known throughout the community there. So that's where we did our midnight mass for Christmas because we knew the show was going to be so good and the singing was incredible and you can sing along. We all sang along and it was such a community spirit. It was insane. So it's really powerful, that sort of thing, Dash, like really powerful, that sort of thing.
Mm. But going back, because you said play,
Mm,
spirituality, and work, I know
yeah,
I've been in leadership courses where they say draw a circle and segment it into the important parts of your life, and then you have to assign a percentage
yeah,
to like how much time that happens ideally, and then
yeah,
how much it is in reality.
yeah.
And so you can have as many segments as you want. And I do think, like, going back to what Luke was kind of saying, there's like obvious things like sleep, but I think play gets left out a lot.
Mm,
And I don't know if we know how to define play very well, because sometimes we blur it with hanging out with our friends, and sometimes we blur it with exercise, and we blur it. But like, I was just wondering, like, is play important to you and feeling like your success and you're living life to the best of your ability, or is it something that you categorize in other areas?
I think play is huge. I think it is when I was first like beginning to like work as a psychologist, I remember one of the first things that my supervisor said to me was like, you're a clinician, you're acting with professionalism, integrity, but you've also got to operate and work from a space of lightness as well. And I thought that was so powerful, that idea of lightness. And I started thinking about it in my own like personal life. Am I like operating from a space of like lightness?
Wow.
And I noticed that when you start going from a more, lightness, playfulness, you start taking things a little less seriously, it really does kind of like harken back to like that childhood like state, that child state, right? And I noticed that as soon as I started bringing more of that lightness into the way that I operated, right, not only physically did I feel a lot more relief, like you're not gritting your teeth, you're not bracing for these like impacts, right? But it like changed the dynamic of like relationships as well.
mm,
I think that play is so, so important.
mm.
But when you talk about lightness, like, what do you do to get to that lightness space?
Yeah. I think as we kind of you know, grow and develop, there's this concept of things like responsibilities, right? And this concept of like stakes, right? There's a lot of importance in what we're doing in the world, whether it's through our roles, whether it's maintaining relationships. We have duties, we have things we need to complete. And once you kind of begin taking the pressure off of that, almost coming from that childlike state of like, I'm just here to like experience the world, like there is no kind of defined thing I need to be doing, all the like those other things that you have to do will naturally be done, but you'll be doing it from a state of this is all kind of fun. This is all just like, whatever happens, happens. And that's when you can incorporate a bit of that playfulness, that bit of like cheekiness, like, things can be funny, even if things are important, they can still be an element of like joviality to it. And it just makes like wading through life just feel so much more enjoyable, I think. And you just feel more content because there's no expectations about how you go about like living your life and things that you do.
Hmm.
I went over to my sister's house last week and we played this card game, Cards Against Humanity.
Oh, yeah.
And we laughed so hard. My face was aching by the end of it, like absolutely aching. And then as I was driving home, I was thinking, I can't remember the last time I laughed that hard and for that long. Like
Mm.
and we had won the game and we kept going because we were
Yeah.
just having such a good time, laughing like that until it was like, okay, it's time to go to bed now. But I reckon that filled my heart up, like absolutely filled my heart up, changed my brain chemistry that night just for however many days, just from playing a game, just laughing and laughing like that.
And I do think laughter is a big part of play. And I know that there are times I will deliberately seek out like hanging out with particular people just because they make me laugh so much. Like,
Mm,
that's what we do together, is we just tell ridiculous stories and laugh. And I really enjoy that, and that's important to my feeling like I'm doing okay in life. Because otherwise, I think my personality can be quite intense, and I can bring a intensity to things if I haven't had that break of laughter. And other things that for me might be play is, going for walks or being at the beach or, being in nature and stuff like that. And it's not necessarily that we're laughing, but we're absorbing something different. And it's kind of,
Mm.
again, changing the way we see things or think about things. I find that I feel like watching TV shows and movies isn't as play for me anymore. Because I feel like I spend too much time trying to find a show I want to watch, and then you start watching a show and you're like, is it grabbing my attention enough to like commit to this? And it almost becomes a stressful thing in and of itself. Whereas I think this year, success for me isn't necessarily like, oh, I'm ticking off all of these. Like I've watched all of the latest things. Like I still haven't watched Devil Wears Prada 2, and Devil Wears
Mm.
Prada 1 was one of my favorite movies. But I'm just like, yeah, do I need to have watched that in its opening week? Probably
Yeah.
not. I'd rather go out with some friends who will absolutely make me laugh.
Mm. Whereas I went to Devil Wears Prada 2 this week. I
Did it
saw it
laugh?
on,
Did you
yeah.
laugh? You probably did laugh. It
I
is a
loved
funny
it
show.
because it was a full cinema and I could enjoy it with the entire cinema. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things I was saying to my sister. I'm really glad it's such a full cinema because we'll all enjoy it together. And sometimes someone might laugh and their laugh makes you laugh. It's almost like I enjoy the experience more because there's more people in the theater to it. Like Community again, there's more people in the theater to enjoy it with. It was really fun. It was really fun.
When you guys like, because we're talking about this idea of winning at life, when you're kind of having those subjective experiences of like, okay, my life isn't feeling super balanced at the moment, does there tend to be some recurring part of life that you notice either is being neglected or that like you're overindulging in?
If I don't get enough sleep is a big thing
Mm.
Mm.
for me. Yeah, I've really noticed that. And if I don't get good quality sleep, I actually don't need a lot of sleep, but I need it to be good quality when I do sleep. And
Mm.
so when I get out of routine, that's when things start to really fall apart for me. And if I don't rest enough as well, like I need to rest sometimes. And so I have to sometimes almost keep some days as sacred do nothing days. I have to really do that. And the do nothing days may be rotting in bed, just reading a book. That could be a do nothing day, even though I'm reading a book. But yeah, something for the soul.
Yeah. I think I can see it in terms of the type of person I become when I'm
Yeah.
not
Mm.
winning, not having the best life. Um, and that is more reactive, that is more intense, that's more um, just, I feel more tired and like I'm drudging through, like I'm just surviving. Like when I find myself counting down to Friday or I'm counting down to a particular thing, then I'm like, okay, we're not enjoying life right now, are we? Um, and it is hard because there are periods where there's things out of your control. Like, even with health stuff that I'm just like, holy moly, like this is hard and I'm not enjoying life because I'm not well. Um, but then there are other times when it's like, yes, I've worked all weekends for the last, I can't remember when I didn't. So I'm not having rest days. But then part of me is like, do I need the rest day? But like, I do need to sleep well, but I'm not sleeping that well because the dog keeps waking me up because she's restless, sundowning. Um, so it's like really hard to sometimes control all the elements of what is a good life. So I don't know, I've grappled with it a lot. I think the thing that I've realized is when I know the things that are out of my control are happening, like health, I'm not sleeping well, and work is super busy. I have to be super careful about the things I can control. And so that is often saying no to the unnecessary things, both from a work context, from a social context, from a family context. Like I just am like, I have no energy, I have no spoons to give. Spoon theory is a thing that people with chronic disease talk about a lot. I've run out of, if you've got a set amount of spoons at the start of the day, I've run out of spoons. And so I can't
Mm.
engage in that way. And so then I become stricter, which I think can be perceived as being reserved and distant and all of that kind of stuff. But I know that's just what I need
Yeah.
to survive, really.
For sure. I think similarly to me, for me, it is irritability as well. I think really the only core thing I can think of is we probably all have this, like you wake up in a day and there's probably like maybe two or three things you really have to do. And I notice that if I have a day where I don't do those three things, because three things like in the course of a day, depending on what we're talking about here, like you can normally it's quite achievable. But if you end up doing a bunch of like adjacent tasks, as what we might say, those non-compulsory things, you finish the day, you haven't done what you need to, but you've done all this other extra stuff, whether it was like reading books that you didn't need to, or watching YouTube, or all this type of stuff. That's when I notice I can get quite irritable.
Mm,
And as you said, it's in situations like that where it's so important to just space like and pace yourself in your timing, right? Like making sure you complete those things that you need to during the day. And what you like, I noticed that those adjacent things I'm doing also aren't like they're idle, like it's idling, whether it's that's what I would consider like watching TV and watching YouTube, and sometimes playing certain games. Like it is more just like space filling than it actually is like doing anything for nourishment or enjoyment. And so just noticing when I'm doing that, why it is that I'm like, is there a barrier to something that I'm trying to actually do, and kind of rectifying that. And rest is a big one as well for me right now. I don't know if many people have done this, but last night I wanted to have like a little bit of a nap, and I wanted to make sure I didn't nap until like past 5:30.
yeah.
So I put an alarm on,
Mhm.
but I actually put an alarm on for 5:30 a.m. And
Oh,
that's what happened this morning is I woke up at 5:30 a.m. to my
so you
alarm.
slept the whole way through.
I know I
Yeah.
got up I got
Yeah.
up before
Okay.
5:30 last night, and I was like, great, I beat the alarm. But
But then you wake up.
the alarm had not yet sounded. That's why I had beaten it. And so just noticing that things like that can happen, as you said, life can happen, but just having kind of a clear plan of attack about how you're going to operate for the rest of the day.
It's making me think about something once that my mum said to me when both of her and I were going through a hard time, and she said, "When does life get easier? When does it get easier, Fiona?" And I
Mm,
was saying to mum, "It actually doesn't. This is
no.
life. This is the ups and the downs, and you just ride through it. And this is it. Like, so just enjoy it because there's it's just always going to be like this. It's always going to be like a roller coaster." And when I was saying it to her, that was actually almost an aha moment for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I hadn't
Mm,
pre-thought of it. It was just like, no, this is just life. And I think since I said that to her too, in my own mind, it was like, this is the way it is. So just you can be glass half empty or glass half full. I often think gratitude about I woke up today. I do. Since I've had my health concerns, I woke up today and I always think about I will never get this time back. Was that worth giving that my energy for that time? I think that all the time
Yeah.
mhm.
about I will never get this back. So just appreciate it with the good and the bad. Just take it both
Yeah,
ways.
absolutely.
Yeah. It is interesting though, because I feel like through your life, what makes life successful also does change.
Mm,
And so I think it's being, what did you call it? Psychological
I like
adaptability or
flexibility.
mm,
flexibility. I think it's like, oh, does this still hold true for
mm,
me right now? Am I holding
mm.
on to something that I might have outgrown or I is not the reality for me? And moving on past that, I think is also sick. Because I look back on my 20s and what I would have considered successful back then, definitely not what I would consider a successful life or a happy life or anything really.
Mhm.
The goalposts have definitely shifted. Um, yeah.
You're moving into Gen X territory now because we're all in our 50s and above, and we're all like, we don't give a shit anymore. That's where you're moving into.
It's interesting because I feel like there is that catch cry as people get older. Oh, we don't give a shit or we don't give an F about that anymore. But I think you do. You're just more selective on what you do care about.
Don't sweat the small stuff
Yeah,
anymore.
don't sweat the
Yeah.
small stuff or the things that really don't matter and don't lose sleep over that. Like that's
Mm,
ridiculous. Like
mm,
all of that kind of stuff. But then I feel like you're the generations above me. I can see how much they're invested in other
Yeah,
different
other things.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it is interesting to I often watch the older generation and go, oh, what have they let go of?
Yeah.
And will I be letting go of that when I get to that age? Because at the moment it's super important for me.
Mm.
So true.